All right, well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. We are excited to have you join us for our Q&A with the PR Pro webinar. We are so glad that you are here. Today's featured speaker is Jason Mudd. He is the managing partner for Axia Public Relations. He is our trusted advisor and strategist to some of America's most admired brands. Jason's worked with American Airlines, Budweiser, Dave & Buster's, H&R Block, Hilton, HP, Miller Lite, New York Life, just to name a few. He founded Axia in July 2002. And if you guys have any questions, please chat them throughout this webinar. We will answer those as they come in. So thanks, Jason. Welcome.
Thanks, Becca. I'm glad to be here. I wanted to give an opportunity for all of our attendees today to share in the chat what are your expectations for our time today. And so if everybody just take a minute to do that, we would love to address your expectations during this meeting and make sure it's a very successful time we have together. In addition, if you have questions, as Becca mentioned, please chat those in. Becca will be paying attention to those and making sure we address any question you might want to ask us, about public relations. And yes, so thank you for the introduction. We are Axia Public Relations, and we're here to help you get more money out of your public relations investment. And so let's just jump in right away and answer questions that you and others asked us up front in advance of this webinar. So one popular question we were asked, and we seem to get asked quite a bit, is how do you measure PR? And measuring public relations is not easy, but it certainly is the right way to go and a smart way to produce your PR campaign. So we're going to jump right into this. So here are 7 principles for how we measure PR, and we adopted these along with the AMEC Barcelona principles. The first measure, our first principle, is goal setting and measurement are vital. We believe, as I just stated earlier, that's very important to your PR program. Measuring PR's effect on outcomes is more important than measuring outputs. So we truly want to know, what does the PR campaign actually do versus how busy was the campaign and how much work was produced. Principle number 3 is it's important to measure the effect PR efforts have on business results. So the more alignment your PR program is with your business and what the company is trying to accomplish will not only prove to be more valuable to the company, but PR will gain more respect in the boardroom, and it will show more cohesiveness. And then number 4 is media measurement requires quantity and quality. So not just how many hits you might have gotten, both site visits or exposure of audience share or even views of your social media posts, but really what was the quality of that engagement and that visibility. Principle number 5, which is a question that we will get more into later, is advertising value equivalency is not the value of public relations. That's often called AVE, or comparing visibility generated by PR as to what it might have cost to go buy the raw advertising for that same amount of time or space or visibility. Principle number 6, you can and should measure social media. Of course you should, and you should measure any type of media that you're involved in, whether it's paid media, earned media, shared media, or owned media. And then principle number 7 is transparency and the ability to replicate are paramount to sound measurement. And so yes, that would mean, first of all, you want to be transparent with your results, truthful, and let everyone in the organization have access to them. But in addition, you want to be able to replicate it. So if you measured one thing one year and you don't measure it the next year, then you have fewer items that you are able to compare it to year over year or quarter over quarter. And then we want to talk about PR measurement framework. So in order to have PR measurement, you must start with research, planning, and implementation. What that means is you must do a little research first to figure out where you're starting, what is your starting point, and then you need to plan for how you're going to measure, and also plan for your program and your strategy and the service, the implementation. And then obviously you have the actual implementation of your program. And then you can start to measure. So a lot of people just want to jump into, well, how do you measure? And the answer is, well, first you got to do a little research up front. You got to plan for the measurement, and you got to implement your program. Then you get to measure. It seems like common sense, but a lot of people like to jump straight into, well, how are we going to measure this? And then what does implementation look like? And I would recommend you start with research, planning, implementation, then measurement. And we're going to take this a step further. So your research, planning, implementation involves setting objectives, collecting inputs, and then implementation is obviously beginning activities. And then, whoa, look at this. There are 4 different measurements in our framework. So outputs, outtakes, outcomes, and impacts. And each one are important, and you'll see they kind of follow a flow, which we'll explain right now. So objective 1, or the first thing is objective, and that is what you want to achieve, both organizationally and through communications. And those are often 2 different things, so and yet aligned. So the organization might have a goal of, expanding into new territories, and so therefore the communications objective should also be to support the business through strong communications in that market expansion. Now, obviously with objectives, you would want those to be measurable. And so those may sound more like goals initially, and they are. So you would work closely with your leadership team and your PR team or your PR agency to make those become objectives and make them measurable. The second part of the framework is inputs, and this is what you need in preparation for communication. This would be those objectives, the budget, and the resources required. So what is it going to take as far as resources to get this campaign launched and successful? What's the budget or the financial equation of it, and how we measure it? And then the third thing is activities, the things you do to develop your communication. So that would be formative research, planning, and the actual production or implementation of the program. Then we finally get to jump into measurement. So when you ask this question, how do you measure PR, you probably didn't realize how much of a loaded question it is, but it really is a loaded question. And so the outputs are what you produce, what you produce the target audience receives. So this would be distribution, exposure, and reception. So if you're interested in measuring AVEs, which we don't recommend, that's really just an output. And as you can tell, it's not only just 1/4 of the measurement framework, but it's also just one element, exposure of that one particular framework. So doing some quick math here, it's like 1/3 of 1/4. So it's really an immaterial, very small number if you're even going to measure it. But again, we don't recommend measuring it. And then the fifth one is outtakes. So what audiences do with and gain from the communication, right? So did they did you gain their attention? Do they now have awareness? Do they have understanding? Do they have interest or liking of your communication and your product, service, company ideas? Are they participating? Are they considering your company, your products, your services, or ideas? And then we move to number 6, the outcomes. So this is the effect your communication has on audiences. And so this is, does the audience now learn and know and understand? Did they change their attitude? Do they now have satisfaction hearing your message? Do they now trust your company? Do they prefer your company or your products, services, or thoughts and ideas and leadership? Do they have intention to do something with you, to buy from you, to join you, to support you, to tell others about you in a role of advocacy? And then last but not least is impacts, which certainly has a very key part of the company. And these are the results that stem in full or in part from your communication. So it might be an improved reputation. It might be damage to your reputation. It might be additional relationships. It might be compliance, complying actions, organizational change, social and public change. And really 7 would be also perhaps, if you had a change in revenue or an increase in some other high level objective that you're trying to reach. So long answer short, PR is measured a variety of ways. Here are the 7 measurement framework that we have at Axia that we follow as a best practice in our industry. And then we also have real quickly here what we call a PR measurement funnel. And this is just another way to view. These are your outputs where you're telling your messages, and the outtakes, which is how the audience reacts as far as awareness, understanding, and engagement. Then the outcomes of your program. This is the effects on the audience, the knowledge, trust, consideration, and intent we talked about earlier. And then the impacts. The audience takes actions. They buy from you. They decide to, vote for you, or they decide to stand by you, or forgive you, or whatever that impact might be. Becky, you want to read the next question?
Sure. The next question is, how do you earn media coverage?
Well, that's another great question. And because you asked this question ahead of time, we prepared a graphic showing our earned media process. And it is not unusual for people, when we show them this, they say, oh my gosh, no wonder we're not getting any media coverage, because we only knew of 3 steps, and here you're showing us 18 steps. So of these 18 steps, we start off with our inputs, just like we showed you earlier. You have to have your inputs. And so these are your objectives and your research. Then you do your activities, which is really conceptualizing the pitch or the story. And then step 4 is your messaging, your key messages or whatever messages that you choose to communicate. Then you draft your news release, your media pitch, your media advisory, whatever it is you're working on. Step 6 is very important. You want to make sure that what you submit follows AP style, and that it is free of typos and errors, and it's clear and concise, and it's written in a way that people can understand. At Axia, we have 2 copy editors who review all of our material before we release it. And that way we have confidence and assurance that it looks good, sounds good, grammatically correct, and there's no issues. Item number 7 is visual. You really have to have a visual with any type of media communication, whether it's earned media, shared media, or owned media. There are newsrooms where a story can't even be submitted unless there is a visual associated with it. And so sometimes stories will just sit in a pending status and waiting on a image. And I can tell you that that's a pet peeve of a journalist. If they've written their story and it's sitting there and it can't get published because no one has a visual for them, they say they actually spend more time sometimes hunting down a visual than they do writing the story itself. You want to relieve that reporter of that burden and have them feel like you really help them. Step 8 for us is client, or in your case, if you're inside a PR department or marketing department, who is your client? Your client would be your supervisor and your superiors. They have to sign off on it. So you want some sort of approval. And then next step is relationships. Who do you know that would be interested in this story, or finding the right contacts? And ultimately, hopefully you started building those relationships early on, perhaps even during the input period. And then step 10 is pitching them. And we always recommend and always do pitch by phone, then follow up by email. Even if they don't like to hear from you by phone, it still helps you stand out a little bit. It's a second touch in case they saw your email first, or got your voicemail first, or spoke to you first. Then they're actually looking for it. When it comes in, they're more likely to click on it, open it. And our research shows spend a little more time considering it versus just a cold email, or even a warm email, but you just didn't take the time to reach out to them 2 different ways. So step 11 is distribute. Typically that's done by email nowadays. When I was early in my career, it was fax. But now we're pretty much just doing our pitching through email, our distribution through email. Another distribution channel is step 12, which is posting. That's where you can post to a newswire like Business Wire, PR Newswire, PR Web, and other solutions that are out there. We personally use PR Newswire. It may not be the best product out there, but it's a good one, and we get favorable pricing with them based on the volume that we do. Step 13 is follow-up, and so that's very important. You'll see we put phone and email icon, social media, and other ways. I would be careful about following up through Facebook unless you truly are personal friends with that person. Although I will tell you, a lot of my media contacts over the years are friends with me on Facebook. And that's a great way for me to be able to speak to them where they can speak candidly and give me their undivided attention on topics. But following up is probably one of the most important steps and the most neglected step here. And journalists will tell you they don't like it when you follow up, but the old cliche of the squeaky wheel gets the grease is pretty true. And we have found, and we celebrate follow-up. We found follow-ups are very successful and a key indicator of success. And we celebrate follow-ups at Axia because we know they work. And anytime somebody has a great story to share about how they follow up, we give them the time to share that in our team meetings so that we can be reminded how important it is to follow up. And then step 14, if you have something that a reporter wants to interview, that's when the interview stage takes place. Not all news stories require an interview. Sometimes they're just writing a quick feature on a product or a brief, and everything a good PR person provided them should be sufficient. But when it's not, or when they want to do more, you should celebrate that also. So an interview is a good opportunity. And we always recommend spokesperson training for the individuals who are going to participate in the interview. And then, that should probably be part of the input or early activity stage. And then you want to monitor for that media coverage. So if you know that you're going to get a story written, you want to monitor for it and be looking for it. Ideally, you have an agency who has a service, or you have a service yourself that is monitoring for your keywords in the media. And therefore, step 16, you can clip and share that coverage with your team, with your leadership. And if you have the rights, you could also post it on your website and social media, or share their social media post of your of the article in which you're featured, briefed, or sourced or interviewed for. And then outputs, again, this is where you're going to measure. We went through all the measurement steps a little bit earlier. If you missed that, there'll be a recording available later. And report. So obviously, you want to monitor, clip, and share, but then you want to measure and report that back to management and leadership. So this is our 18th step of the earned media process. And I'm sure there are many people on this webinar right now who are saying the same thing we've heard so many times. I thought there were 3, maybe 4 or 5 steps. No wonder we're struggling to get earned media coverage for our company. We had no idea there was 18 steps. Becca?
The boss wants us measuring AVEs. What should we do?
All right. So I've heard that question asked before. And yes, so AVE, or advertising value equivalency, as we talked about earlier, is not really a celebrated practice of how to measure PR. We demonstrated earlier there are many more ways to do it. I would explain what we talked about earlier with your management. And, there are other things you can measure, including outputs, outtakes, outcomes, and impacts. And so really, AVE, all it is an output. So it's one of these 4 different ways that you can measure PR. And so it's a small piece of the outputs. We showed earlier how, it's about 1/3 of this 1/4 of the measurement. And so I think that's important to kind of say, hey, it's great that we want to measure what it would cost to go buy advertising of a similar amount of visibility and impressions. But what's way more important is we look at, did we tell our message? Was it, how does the audience react? What's the effect on the audience? And, what is the impact ultimately where the consumer takes action, the audience takes action, which is way more important than how many people we reached, because you could reach millions of people and have nothing happen, or you could reach dozens of people and have them all buy. So AVEs are not really a great way to measure PR. Becca?
What's the best way to report on PR?
So I think this is a great question, and one that is probably unique to your organization and your team, your company's preference. So I'm going to show you how we've decided to measure PR after working with corporations for 17 years. Our reports are, we report weekly on the activities. So every Friday, our clients receive a weekly activities report showing them what we completed for the week. They're also getting a monthly metrics report, which is showing our progress to reaching the KPIs agreed upon in their campaign. And then we report results quarterly in a report in which we report our progress towards meeting our objectives for the PR program. And then we have an annual executive report for the boardroom and the leadership team that shows at a very high level what the PR program accomplished for the year. We feel like this approach is comprehensive and provides all the information that our clients need, starting with the weekly report when the client always knows what we accomplished this week and what we're working on next week. And that's available in their email box at any given time, so that if they have a moment in the hallway where somebody says, hey, what's going on with the PR campaign, they can quickly pull up the email and share it with them or read through it with them. They can pull it up in a meeting where it might come promptu. We know from talking to our clients that sometimes they're called into a meeting and they've got, a moment's notice that, hey, we need an update on the PR program. So we give them that backup that they can have on a regular basis, so they're always up to date and never wondering what we've been working on and what we accomplished. The monthly metrics report also is typically presented on a monthly basis to our client when time allows. And so we usually do a screen share and walk them through that presentation, or we can do it in person. And the quarterly results, we almost always prefer to do that in person or at least by screen share. And the annual executive summary just depends on the client. Sometimes we're presenting that at their annual leadership retreat, at their annual company meeting. It just can vary, but that's always a good document to really show leadership what the PR investment has done for them. And so we got a lot of questions that were worded, what software do you use for media blank? Media monitoring, media pitching, media database, media alerts, and social media listening, and just so many other things. So to answer this question, to be candid, I'm not sure what the pros and cons are the different softwares that are out there. I just know that we use several of them, and you really have to spend time evaluating each one to see what your unique needs are and what your priorities are, and oftentimes what your budget is. But the good news is that we use a lot of them, and so I'm certain if you reached out to us, we could give you some feedback on what we found to be the pros and cons of each and why we use what we use. But in my experience, we typically have everything our clients have and more. And sometimes our clients ultimately just depend on us to use it, and they find that they kind of wasted money on the software because either no one really uses it in their organization, or they're just depending on us to use the equivalency. And so while I don't have a specific example of what we use and recommend, I can tell you we use a bunch. So we have Cision, we have TVIs, we have what else we have? We have Meltwater. So we just have a whole bunch of this stuff, and a whole bunch of software for social media and earned media and HubSpot and many other things. So if you have specific questions, please feel free to reach us, and we will be happy to answer those on a case-by-case basis.
Should we try influencer marketing?
Well, that's a great question. I would say, possibly, probably. It really just depends on the unique needs of your organization, the compliance requirements of your industry, and what you're really trying to promote or produce. But I do find that we found influencer marketing is a direct way to connect with your target audience. And so, you can use that to reach, a big, broad audience. And we have a little research that shows that companies are getting back, allegedly, $20 for every dollar they spend on influencer marketing. Now, if I can do a little callback to when somebody was asking about AVEs, right? You heard that statistic that said $20 for every $1 they spend on influencer marketing. Well, hopefully that's $20 not of AVE, but that's $20 of ROI or product transactions. So that would be great. But in order to take advantage of the niche market your company wants to appeal to, influencer marketing is definitely one way to go. And people follow influencers because they're typically experts or thought leaders in the field of interest, study, or enthusiasm. And they create content that is engaging, clever, and consistent. So followers of influencers are typically loyal to anything that the influencer might recommend, and they follow their feeds closely. So influencer marketing is definitely an option. If you haven't explored it, we'd love to connect with you and give you some more insight on what we've seen and how we can help you and how our program and process works.
What PR trends do you see emerging soon or in 2020?
All right, well, that's a great question. it's hard to believe for me that 2020 is just around the corner. I would say that, the one thing that just continues to be top of mind for me is I love how our profession has really gotten a lot more sophisticated over the last few years, about realizing that PR is about storytelling and PR is about connecting and engaging with your audience. It's not about manipulation. It's not about spin. It's about authentic relationships and building those relationships, building trust on behalf of the company. So I think the trend is that, we're producing a lot of content as an industry. We're producing a lot of content as companies, as consumers, with blogging and social media for sure being a big, big part of that. And so every year we're producing more and more content, but really we're producing more and more noise in the marketplace. So I think what's happening in PR right now is that there's really a focus on being more genuine and authentic with your storytelling, putting the customers first or the consumer or the audience first, putting them in the spotlight, and making all of your communication really be about them and you and your company taking a back seat to the spotlight and just being part of the conversation instead of trying to be the star of the conversation. And I just think that consumers like that better. They like, feeling included, feeling special. That's nothing new in theory based on kind of the human mind and human behavior. But I'm seeing companies do a better job of engaging in that way. And if you hit our website, axiapr.com, on the homepage, we have, 19 ways PR has changed for 2019. And we talk about how traditional PR doesn't work anymore. And I think that's going to be really the key trend in emerging features in PR for the next several months or years as we get better and better at getting entrenched in the marketplace with our consumers and telling them the stories and the information that they want to know. One thing that we always talk about is, when whatever content you're producing, it has to make the life easier of the person that you're writing it for. So if you're just writing sales copy for them and you're trying to sell them on something, that's not going to work. But what will work is being helpful, being a resource, being genuine and authentic. And that's how I think PR is going to continue to change and evolve. So thank you for that question.
I see Axia uses the ASO model. Why did you drop the P in Peso?
Hey, that's a great question. So good observation, whoever asked this question. So basically, Peso stands for Paid, Earned, Shared, and Owned Media. And as a PR firm, we believe that PR professionals aren't in the business of paid media, and therefore the P in Peso doesn't really apply to PR practitioners. Now, out of respect for Ben Sucks, who was the one who originally conceptualized the Peso model, they would say what they're trying to do is establish the difference between PR and what PR does versus marketing. And that's exactly right. So there's nothing wrong with them having the P in Peso, but when it comes to who we are and what we do at Axia, we view paid media as something that either advertising companies do, and we don't believe advertising companies are PR agencies. But we do think that under earned, shared, and owned media, there is items that are paid, such as, in earned media, we have what we talk about. In earned media, we have, in earned media, you can do paid placements, which look like earned media, which is called advertorial. You can also sponsor or optimize your earned media so more people see it. And so that's a form of paid media under the umbrella of earned media. Similarly, under shared media, right, you can boost your post or sponsor post. And while that is a form of payment, you usually are taking really good content you developed for social media or shared media, and you're putting a little extra juice or energy or dollars behind it to boost it. And the same is true with owned media. If you developed a good piece of owned media content or you want to drive more traffic to your site, you can certainly use pay-per-click and other paid items underneath that owned umbrella to get more traffic to it. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please comment and ask a follow-up question. But thank you for asking and paying close attention to how we position ourselves. And Becca, before you ask this next question, I just want to take a minute to remind our audience participants that this is a great time for them to share any questions they might have in the comments so that we can answer them during our time together today.
How is PR different than marketing?
You know, we should have asked that question earlier because I just kind of glossed over that a little bit when we were talking about the Peso model. But PR and marketing are often used together, and they do work together, and often PR is under the umbrella of marketing, but they're not the same thing. The main difference is about the final goal. So marketing aims to sell a product or service while PR builds mutually beneficial relationships with the audience. And so while PR certainly can help with sales, marketing is more focused on how do we get people to buy, and PR is more focused on how do we create, meaningful relationships and a good reputation. So public relations creates an environment that fosters the marketing effort. But, truly in our experience, we sense that PR is one of the ways that the best brands build their brand and reputation. And so they don't start with marketing. They don't start with advertising. They start with PR. And the good news is the bar to entry for PR is pretty low, meaning any company can do it. You might get outspent in advertising, but you can be really creative in PR. And it's a great way to win over the competition by using, authentic and genuine PR to overcome a big marketing budget that your Goliath competitors might have.
What's the difference between boosting a Facebook post and a Facebook ad?
Well, this is probably a better question to ask Becca since she has a lot more experience with this than I do. But, what happens is when you post on Facebook, because Facebook is in the business of making money, when you first post something on Facebook, you're only going to reach about 1 to 3%, depending on who you ask or what study you refer to. But only about 1 to 3% of the people who actually like your Facebook page are going to see organically your post in their feed. And so for a lot of you on this call, you might be wondering, or this webinar, why don't we get very many likes or engagement on our social media? And the answer is right there, that only 1 to 3% of your organic audience is actually seeing your post until such time that you either begin to get engagement with that post, which is, likes, comments, views, and shares, or you put some money behind it. And since Facebook is now publicly traded, they are certainly looking to make their investors happy with getting a good ROI with their investment in the stock and the company to continue to increase its value and financial performance. And so boosting on your company's Facebook page means reaching more people ultimately for a fee. And the more money you put behind a boosted post, the more people are going to see it in their news feeds. And, boosting is a basic form of social advertising. So, Facebook ads are kind of a more advanced way to advertise on Facebook. We require you to have a Facebook ad manager account and a credit card. But that's one way to kind of guarantee that you get a certain amount of visibility on Facebook. And I think one thing that's important is, this is what the person really asking is, what's the difference between boosting a post and a Facebook ad? And so when you write an organic post, you can boost it and you can get more people to see it through boosting it, which is basically paying for an ad, but your post becomes an ad versus a Facebook ad is a little bit different where it's just genuinely an ad that you create and then you boost it or you sponsor it to be seen in more places. So one is actually a post that you wrote that then you put money behind it, and one is an ad that you just choose to have an ad. Becca, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that was great.
Okay, thanks. You're too kind.
What's the best way to quickly improve our company's online reviews?
Well, this is a good question and one that Becca is also very familiar with. But I would say, quickly is the part of that question that concerns me because, as Warren Buffett says, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to lose it. And so I think, unless you quickly got really positive reviews, it's going to be hard probably to really quickly improve them. And so I would say that I would look at a longer term strategy instead of a Band-Aid strategy, although I do sympathize with the need to improve reviews. I will tell you there's one agency I know of, and they got a couple of negative reviews. And so the way they quickly fixed it is they had all of their employees go and leave positive reviews for the company, for the agency. Not only is that unethical, but really, the truth is that they didn't seem to care about reviews until they got a couple bad ones, and then suddenly they wanted to jump all over it. So I would say the best way to quickly improve your online reviews is to ask. And that's the way to do it long term and the way to do it short term. The problem is a lot of businesses won't ask for reviews. And the ethics of it is that you can't give them something in exchange for leaving you a positive review. You can give them something, although you don't need to, and I don't know that you should, and give them something for leaving a review, period. So if you leave us a review, we'll give you 10% off, or a koozie, or a t-shirt, or a free day, or a free meal, or whatever it is that you might offer to them. But ethically, in order to do that, you have to offer them the same compensation, whether they give you a positive, neutral, or negative review. But otherwise, I think the important thing is to ask and to vary the way you ask. I have a company that I work with, and just out of the blue, all of a sudden, I was getting emails, phone calls, text messages, and all kinds of things from them asking me to leave a review, even though I've been doing business with them for like 15 years. And I thought, okay, so reviews are becoming important to them all of a sudden. But then the very next day, I got bombarded again with the same volume of requests, all at once. 3 or 4 different ways they're asking, 3 or 4 times in one day, they're asking me to leave them a review. And so, I don't know that that's a good approach either. That might be a little too aggressive. To that end, though, we have developed, in conjunction with a software development company, a product we call Review Maxer. And Review Maxer helps you manage your online reviews. It's got partially an automated tool, but it's highly customizable. And so it not only manages, monitors, and reports your reviews, but it gives you ways to help promote your positive reviews, how to intercept your unhappy customers' reviews, and try to make them happy before they go and tell everyone about it. That product is called Review Maxer. It's online at reviewmaxer.com. And I think if you stay with us for the webinar, we have a special offer for those folks who are interested in learning more about Review Maxer. Becca, did I leave anything out on that?
No.
Good. I do have a note here that 90% of consumers read local companies' reviews before making a purchase. So you definitely want to try to gain more positive reviews by asking current and past customers to leave a review about their experience, and implement review management software to easily monitor and respond to online reviews.
What's the difference between outbound and inbound marketing?
So this is pretty easy. Inbound marketing is when a lead comes inbound through, ideally, typically through your website. And outbound is where you're making an outbound effort to try to reach them. So, inbound is kind of pulling them in and attracting them to you, where outbound is kind of pushing them towards you. And I think that, as we mentioned earlier, how PR is changing. PR is changing in a way that, customers like to buy. They don't like to be sold. And I'm not sure if there was ever a time where customers like to be sold. So really, inbound is kind of a way of marketing yourself through value-added, educational-driven content that establishes your credibility, your thought leadership, your value proposition, and informs and educates the marketplace of who you are, what you do, what you offer, and the insights and, like I said, education on how to do it and do it well, or how you do it and how you do it well. So I think that's a pretty good summary of it. Inbound marketing has been kind of a big deal for the last 5 or more years. And I think we've been doing it for 5 to 7 years for ourselves and as a service for our clients. And, one of the quickest ways that we've grown over the years is through having outstanding search engine optimization for the entire 17 years we've been in business. I started doing search engine optimization back in 1998 or 99. And it's always been a great way to bring more leads to your company, and that's a form of inbound marketing. Okay, Becca, I think we want to turn it over to the Q&A from the audience. Any questions that the audience might be asking or have asked us, now would be a great time for us to jump through those.
Yeah, so I think you already addressed influencer marketing a little bit, but one of our participants wants to hear your point of view on influencer marketing and trends that you've seen there.
Perfect. All right. Well, Lee, thank you for asking that. I would say that, influencer marketing, number one, is growing, both in the influence that influencers seem to have as more and more people are adopting Instagram and other platforms that allow for a direct connection with an influencer. I have kids and they are glued on YouTube anytime they're not in front of their computer, they're on their phone watching YouTube videos. And so I think for their generation, it's only going to become, stronger and bigger. And our experience also tells us that influencers are also getting paid more and more for their work as their audience shares increase, but also as the adoption of influencer marketing grows, and especially, those that are into it early. So I would say the trends that we're seeing is, again, it's becoming increasingly credible and at the same time increasingly more expensive to participate in influencer marketing. But our view on influencer marketing is that it works and that companies should explore it in the right way for their brand. And, a lot of times the first time you do something is the hardest. And so, we certainly be happy to guide you or your company through that process. So I hope I answered your question, Lee. Thank you for asking, and please ask more while you're here.
I did get a question via email about inbound marketing website design and how we do that for clients, if we recommended it. It looks like Jason just lost audio, so we'll give him a second to come back on. And I can kind of talk about that. Inbound marketing website design is designing a website with that content, that inbound marketing content that helps you attract customers to become qualified prospects, and then to convert them into leads and customers that helps you grow your company. So that's how we do that. It's really the content that we're creating while we are designing and developing your website. And it looks like he gained audio.
I'm back. Yeah. Okay. So, Becca, what was the question again?
It was about inbound marketing website design and how we do that, and if we recommend it, and any tips to do that.
So a quick story is years ago, we had been practicing inbound marketing for probably about 5 years. And I decided I'd reach out to some companies I know that are web design shops and kind of see what they were doing in inbound and what their successes were, and kind of see if we could collaborate together on some best practices. And I'll never forget, I called one company in particular, and they just have, they have so many clients. Like hundreds of clients that they manage websites for. And I said to him, hey, what are you doing with inbound marketing? And he literally said, I don't know, what's that? And I thought to myself, if you're a guy who, does website design and website management for a living, and you've got hundreds of clients and you have no idea what inbound marketing is, I feel like, you've been kind of hiding under a rock, or, probably aren't giving your clients your very best, or a very good solution. And so a couple of days later, he calls me and he says, hey, I couldn't stop thinking about what you talked about inbound marketing. Honestly, I'd never heard of it, but I did a little research, and, you're talking about social media, and we don't really do social media. And I kind of laughed and I just said, oh my gosh. I'm like, did you really research this? Because inbound marketing, social media is only part of it. And so, I started educating him a little bit more on it. He just said, gosh, that just sounds like a lot of work and, not really the way we do websites. Well, what you got there is really what we used to call in the 90s, brochureware, where you're just taking a brochure and you're putting it on the website and you're hoping people read it and want to buy from you. But in this day and age, we've gotten a lot more modern with, again, like I talked about earlier, the emerging trends of PR will continue to be being a better storyteller, connecting with your audience in a genuine and authentic way where they become part of the conversation and your company is a part of the conversation too, versus your company shouting from a megaphone about how great you are, who you are, what you do, and how great you are, which nobody wants to hear. We've all been in those cocktail party or networking conversations where someone just talks about themselves and just won't stop, won't breathe, won't give you a second to engage in the conversation or share your opinion. And no one likes that. So that's kind of what most marketing is just, shouting over your audience, where PR is actually having a conversation with your audience. Anybody else have more questions through the chat?
I have one. We haven't talked a lot about crisis communications. So if you could address how to best be prepared for a crisis, I think that would be helpful.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that we suggested, offered, mentioned that we would include in today's presentation. So we've got a great ebook and webinar specifically dedicated to crisis communications. I would encourage you to check that out. We also have an article about the 10 steps to managing a crisis. And, ultimately, every company needs to have a crisis plan. It can be pretty short. We've talked about creating one sometimes for companies that's just one page, but I found that to be pretty tough to do because crisis planning does have to account for a wide variety of situations and circumstances. But, we've seen some research that for every dollar you spend planning for a crisis, you save 7 when a crisis actually happens, and that's from the Small Business Administration. We've also seen statistics of something to the effect of, I believe, 40% of companies never recover from a crisis, meaning they literally go out of business because a crisis happened to them. And so, like everything else in life, it's all about perception versus reality. So if people don't think your company is going to survive or make it, they're going to stop doing business with you. And that's when you need them the most, is in the middle of a crisis. So, I think the key thing for a crisis is probably take a day off-site or something and come up with a crisis plan. There are 10 steps to the crisis plan, and we share those available on our website. But ultimately, you want to figure out who's the crisis team, who's going to be involved in the decision-making, who's going to be your spokespeople. You want to train those spokespeople. You want to develop your messages. You want to develop the platforms you're going to communicate your messages through. You're going to want to do some role playing where you pretend that a certain crisis is actually happening at your company. That could be an active shooter. That could be a loss in production. It could be a scandal with an executive. And it actually, we've kind of seen all those things, and we've managed all those things on behalf of companies. And so, so either hire an outside party to do some PR planning or crisis planning for you, help you put that plan together, or engage a firm like Axia or another qualified PR firm to be on call in the event of a crisis and to implement that crisis plan that they helped you put together. But I'll tell you, in my experience, the best crisis communications and best crisis management occurs when you already have a proactive and intentional PR program in place. And the crisis plan is just kind of like, in case of emergency, break glass, and you implement it. And you seem to recover better when you are already engaging in a proactive PR program ahead of time, so that, when you suddenly start doing PR because of a crisis, it comes across as being more authentic and genuine. One insider tip that we have seen that companies tend to make a mistake of is they have pre-scheduled a whole bunch of social media posts and other content, and then suddenly in the middle of a crisis like a 9/11 or a crisis in your own company, you're out there offering promotional content through social media and email blasts. And so one thing we always recommend to our clients, and put this in the crisis plan, is stop and or pause all promotional activities while you're going through the crisis, so you're not really kind of candidly talking out of two sides of your mouth, or your efforts are seen disingenuous. So shutting down or pausing your social media and email blasts and other marketing. And if you're doing it, paid media advertising is also very important.
We talked about how PR is different than marketing. Could you talk more about how PR is different than advertising?
Sure. So in theory, I guess a simple way to look at it is advertising, you pay for it, and PR, you earn it. And so that means that in advertising, you're pretty much, if you have a big enough check, you can get pretty much whatever you want within the advertising space, both literal space and figurative space. But, you know, if you had enough money, you could put hot air balloons in the air. You could put banners behind planes. You could put ads on the Super Bowl. You could paint, you know, could wrap cars and put up billboards. And, you know, basically anywhere that's a medium, you could probably find a way to pay to have your message put on it. But advertising in many ways is kind of, you know, clutter and disruptive, whereas PR is part of the content. So one thing I tell people all the time is, you know, nobody turns on the news to see who's advertising. They turn on the news to be informed and educated and learn and are entertained. And then the same is, you know, I don't know very many people who pick up a magazine or go online to see what ads are popping up on the page. So, you know, I think PR does a good job of making you part of the conversation and integrating you into the content, where advertising is always trying to kind of artificially insert you into the content or surround you or surround the content around you. And so, you know, advertising has a role and it's important, but we just find that PR is, you know, not only obviously what we do and what we do best, but we also sense that it's best for most brands.
Those are all the questions I've got for you.
Okay, well, I'll give our audience one more opportunity to post any new questions they might have. I want to thank each of them for participating today and certainly want to get to our special offer. So let's talk about our special offer, and then we will give an opportunity for anybody else who would like to ask any additional questions as we wrap up. So as a special offer today, Becca and her team are giving away our Review Maxer service, which we mentioned earlier, free for 1 month when you use this discount code of webinar 30. I think that means webinar, you watched it in 30 days free of our Review Maxer service. That's at reviewmaxer.com. That is the online software platform we mentioned earlier that helps you manage and monitor and respond and promote your online reviews. And so if you're interested, use this webinar code. I think we limit it to like, I don't know, the first 5, 10, 20 people who use it, but that will give you basically 1 month free of one account. Most people who use our Review Maxer service are using it for employee reviews. That's one account. Product reviews can be one account also, or each, and then company reviews overall, just what is it like to do business with this company. So we love Review Maxer. We developed it for a client who was really struggling with online reviews. They had a lot of negative reviews, and so we just decided to build that for them, and eventually we've had kind of 3 or 4 iterations of it, and we find that a lot of companies who use it like it. And last we checked, every company who uses it sees their reviews increase within the first 30 days. So it's a really useful tool there. Let's see. Becca, are we seeing any more questions?
There's one more about blogging on a website. Does my site need a blog?
What do you think, Becca?
I say 100% any site needs a blog. That's important for SEO. It's important for thought leadership. You can easily answer frequently asked questions that your customers, clients might have. It's so important when companies that you want to do business with search your company's name online for your website to show up first, or to search for the services that you offer or the products that you sell into a search engine, that your blog posts pop up, that your website shows up, not 5th, not 8th, first. And that's why blogging is so important for that SEO.
Becca, that was a fantastic answer. Thank you for sharing. I would add only to say that when blogging first started appearing on my radar, ballpark, early 2000s, sometime in between the year 2000 and 2004, and people started talking about blogging, I just kind of rolled my eyes because I was like, oh my gosh, who wants to read a whole bunch of content online? Like I just don't have time to read blogs. And the truth is, neither does anybody else. But when you are blogging about a topic that people are interested in, they will follow you. But more importantly, like you said, Becca, search engine optimization. And Google loves blogs. Google rewards blogging. And Becca, I know you've told me this. I've seen this firsthand with Axia. But whenever our clients, the more frequent they blog, the more web traffic they generate. And therefore, the more eyeballs they get on their site and the more opportunities they have to convert leads. I've seen companies who go from blogging once a week to twice a week, and they see their website traffic more than double, even though all they're doing is doubling their output of blogging. And if you can start blogging, 3, 4, 5 times a week, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger for you. And that's always been a good outcome. So, Becca, unless there's any more questions, I think we should wrap up. I want to thank again everybody for being part of the presentation today. And again, I'll just flip back real fast to that special offer. Don't miss out on that if you're interested. And otherwise, we probably need to run to our next thing here at Axia. Becca, do you have anything else to say in closing?
I don't. Thank you, Jason. We appreciate you giving this webinar today.
My pleasure. I enjoyed every minute of it. I'm glad to be here and looking forward to connecting with each of these individuals through LinkedIn or some other way and continuing our conversation. And if there's ever anything that I can do for you, please let us know. Becca, thank you for hosting me today. And everybody have a great week and our very best as you move forward with the information we talked about today.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.